Out of the street corners they scream. You knew it was coming. You've been waiting for this for months. Rumour hardened into fear and now they scream at you. The sirens, their hysterical wail tearing through the white noise of the city. And you run. You run to pick up those things that can never be replaced. A picture of them in the days when they still loved you. Your mother's wedding ring. And then you turn to your shelf of games. You only have room for 5. 5 games for Doomsday. 5 Games for Doomsday is a show in which board game personalities are thrust into a cabin in the woods to outrun an oncoming disaster, but can only take 5 of their games with them. But which will they choose? My guest this week is known for publishing deep strategy games that are well regarded amongst the cognoscenti. His company, Spielworxx, has published games such as Solar Fide, the Deluvia Project and Solaris Mission, and as head of board game development for Compass Games, will be responsible for bringing even more games to the market. My guest this week is Uli Blenemann. Uli, thank you for coming.
I thank you, Ben. So it's really an honor being your guest.
So tell us, how difficult was it for you to choose the 5 games that you're going to take into the cabin?
Yeah, well, it was somewhat difficult. It was not too difficult. I thought a little bit about it, and then I found some games which, in my opinion, have some real play value, which I think are excellent games. But there are also some games which more or less have some nostalgic value for me. So it was a mixture.
So how do you feel that you'd cope in the apocalypse?
Well, I don't think that I would cope at all or well in an apocalypse. So I'm very much a person that is not practical, and probably I'm swept away from the earth within 5 minutes. So I'm not coping well, I think, in such an environment.
So are you a solitary person? Are you happy on your own, or do you need to be around people all the time?
No, I can be a solo person for a long time. I don't need people among me. But really, the most difficult thing I can do is probably get working a light bulb. So everything that is more complex. If I see a car, I can put more gas into it, but nothing else. So out in an environment, just being me, I would be lost immediately. I can't do anything. So I'm very much a person of the 20th, 21st century, and yeah.
So we recently spent some time together at Essen, and what I was struck by is how you knew everybody and everybody knew you. So I guess my question is your sort of clout and your being the centre of social attention within the board game hobby a business expedience, or is it just that's part of your personality and you love to be like that?
I don't think I'm the center of things, but I enjoy talking to people, talking to interesting people, and we are fortunate in our gaming hobby gaming industry that there are lots of interesting and creative people, and at least if I do not know a person, I want to know something from them. I don't have to talk about games at all, but I just want to get some background because I'm interested, and I like to talk, of course, like lots of Germans, but I like to also listen to people, and this, in my opinion, is important. And of course, I'm in this business since '93, which makes it pretty obvious that I know lots of people. But it's important, in my opinion, to know what to do, to know if I have a problem with a game, how to turn to, who can maybe help me. I think this is very important. But I'm very open too. So if somebody comes to me and asks the questions, I do everything I can to help that person.
So how does someone develop that kind of social capital? I mean, how do you get to the position where you're able to go up to someone and say, hey, can you help me with this?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not shy. This is absolutely important. If you're shy, if you don't want to talk to persons, then it will be difficult. But I like to talk, and Yeah, well, the worst thing that can happen, especially in Germany, where people are very direct, some would say they are rude, is that they turn away and won't talk to you. But I have lots of different fields of interest, which also may be an advantage. So I can talk about games, I can talk about history, about books or movies. I'm not saying that I'm an expert, and not at all, but at least I like to talk about these things, and I like to hear different opinions, although I can be very strong, opinionated, or whatever the term is. Yeah, this can happen as well.
So, do you think that the stereotype of the gamer is true, or do you think this is a hobby that attracts people of all different stripes?
It attracts people of all different stripes, I'd say. But I recently noticed that there are more and more people who love to also talk. These omni-gamers that just played games for 23 hours a day and only are able to talk about games all the time. I think they are still there, but we get more and more interesting persons. And I think this is also very important for the whole industry, on a meta level, because only people who know a little bit more than we need more victory points for green or for blue can bring the gaming hobby forward, because they have more experience and they can bring in their experiences from different fields maybe from movies, maybe from video games, but maybe from literature or from other arts. I think this is really important.
So what do you think's attracting these new people, these people who like to talk?
Yeah, well, in my opinion, gaming is a social hobby and always was. Just maybe in the last 20 years here in Germany, there were more and more games where you were just staring on the board, doing your move, doing your stuff, doing your actions, and not talking about anything else. But now people see, maybe they are just sitting for 8 hours in front of a screen, and it's maybe also an easy way to get in touch with other persons. Playing a game, talking about the game first, but maybe in the second meeting they are not talking about the game anymore, but about, yesterday did you see this? What happened to your kid yesterday? You told me that he or she is ill. So I think this is also very important and is very good for board gaming in general.
So do you think that board gaming is, there's this accepted wisdom that board gaming is this great social good, that it brings people together. And sometimes when I'm in my darker moods, and I do this myself, I tend to think that people maybe get a group of people together and it pretty much doesn't matter who it is, as long as they push the cubes at the speed that I would prefer you to push the cubes. Do you think that board gaming fundamentally brings people together?
Yeah, well, very difficult to determine. I think, yes, it brings people together. And for me, there are some friendships. But of course, I've played games with so many people. And frankly, 50%, maybe more. After I've played one game, I don't want to play with them anymore. So maybe I'm a little bit picky, getting older and older. But to me, the game has to be good, but if somebody just pushes cubes around and isn't able to tell one funny story or one funny line maybe, then I don't want to play again. But fortunately, because board gaming is growing and growing, there are more interesting people in this hobby. But probably, on the other hand, there are more people that are not that interesting. And probably a lot of persons who have gamed with me are saying afterwards, I don't want to play with Uli anymore. He is always talking. He has always a story to tell. And I better want to concentrate on winning with my kingdom I had. And all the rest doesn't matter to me. So, the hobby has something for everybody, I guess.
So I want to go back to the beginning and I want to ask you about when you started playing games. When was this? when you were a child?
Yes, as a child, probably with my older brother and definitely with my parents. So we played traditional German games. So with it wasn't that we played a game with my brother and me with my parents all day or even once a day, but regularly. So on weekends and when we had holidays, of course, and with my brother, I played all the time with him. So in the afternoon we got outside playing football, but also when it was raining or in winter, I can remember that we played together, or we had neighboring kids and we played also. So I played games all the time. Yes.
So there's this thing that goes around, that in Germany, gaming is an ingrained part of the culture, that people learn it at their mother's knee. I mean, how true is this?
I think it was true at my time. So in the 70s, in the early 70s, mid 70s, definitely it was true, but probably only at middle class people, or for middle class people, or for upper class people. So of course, proletarians, so people from the working class, they had other things to do, I'm guessing. So I was educated or brought up in the middle class, and our neighbors were middle class people, but at that time, yes, everybody played games. The parents played games with their kids, the kids played games, and of course we had games. So our parents had bought us some board games because they had this disposable income to buy a couple of games for us. I'm not saying that we had hundreds. No, we probably had 3 or 4 or 5 games, board games, but of course at that time you played them 100 times or more and still had fun. But yeah. But I think it's changing, but I don't know exactly.
I remember as a kid that my parents would play cards. And was that the same with you? Were your parents independent gamers from you? I mean, would they go down to the local pub at the weekends and play bridge?
No, I think it was really, they want to educate us, so my brother and me. It was not that they played for fun with us. Probably they enjoyed some games, but they weren't game players at all. So it was just, they will learn some math, they will learn how to cope with losing and all these things. So basically from an educational point of view, especially because my mother was a teacher. So yeah. But my father, from time to time, he went to a pub to play the traditional German card game Scart. But he wasn't a Scart gamer like lots of other Germans at that time who played once a week or even several times a week and then played for money and all this. No, and he wasn't in a club. No, not at all.
So, I mean, do people still play Scart? Is this still a thing? I remember one night I was in Germany and I went into this pub. They call them Eckkneipers, which means pub on the corner. And I went in there and there was a group of older people sat around a table smoking cigarettes, playing a game, probably Scart, something like that. And I was surprised, it's 7 o'clock, a Saturday night, and they're still playing this. Is this still a thing where you are? Do people still play this game?
I'm not seeing it at all. So, which should point you, or we should assume it's not being played. But I've heard that millions of decks of these traditional card decks, of Scart decks, are still sold. Of course, a lot is just they probably immediately go to the closet. But I think there are so many clubs around that these games are being played. I'm just not seeing it. But here in a rural part of Germany, we don't have a lot of pubs, and frankly, I'm not visiting pubs very often, so I'm not seeing it. It's really something that is not played in the open, although there are clubs who are intensely doing this. We have championships in Germany, we have world championships, European championships, so some people must play these.
So when did you become an independent gamer, sort of independent of your parents? When did you learn to develop your own tastes?
Yeah, well, this was as a teenager. So my brother and I, we were on and still are interested in history. So we were interested in historical games. And of course, we thought there aren't any. So apart from chess, which was to our tastes too abstract. So we developed some of our own historical games. So about campaigns. And of course, they were really, really bad. So bad you can't believe it. But in a way, we invented or designed them, and we had fun for a certain time. But then, when I was 14, so in '79, we saw an advertisement in a smallish newspaper. And it was about a shop in Düsseldorf, not too far away for us at that time, and they had American war games to offer, so from SBI, and we immediately ordered one. Later we visited this smallish shop, and we bought our first games, and from there it was no looking back. It was a new world that suddenly opened the doors to us. And having an older brother who knew English better than me at that time was of course a huge, tremendous advantage. And immediately when he was back from school, we always played a game of a war game, and we had so much fun. It was great. It was great at that time.
Obviously, you still game, but does your brother still game?
Just a little bit. So he went from game player to game designer. So he designed a couple of war games, and in my opinion, excellent war games. One maybe even reprinted now, although it was done in '95. But because of his work schedule, he hasn't designed for more than a decade, and he now plays every 4 or 6 weeks. So that's what he's doing. He's basically outside of the hobby. He's not attending Essen and not following the hobby at all these days.
So your first game is Borodino. So firstly, why is this game going to the cabin?
This is definitely for a nostalgic value, because this was our first board game. That was the first game we bought in '79, because it was smallish, inexpensive, and had just 4 pages of rules. So we thought, and we weren't out of necessity Napoleonic fans. Of course, we had read something about Napoleonic warfare, but I'm not even sure we knew at that time the importance of the Battle of Borodino, or in which country this battle was fought. It just fitted our needs very well. And it was for us an ideal introduction to gaming and wargaming, because it was so simple. But still, we played it for the first 5 or 6 times completely wrong. Everything basically was wrong, but we found it out only after rereading the rules. But still, right from the start, first game, we had a lot of fun. Yeah.
So you're interested in history, you're a history student. So do you think it was inevitable that these games would appeal to you? I mean, do you think it's sort of pre-written that you'd be interested in games like these?
Yes, I think so. I think that history and gaming, if this comes together for me, this is a natural thing that I will like, because it also fills the need of a role player. So I'm not saying, of course, especially if you are playing a World War II game, that when I'm playing the Nazis, that I'm now feeling like a Nazi general. Not at all. But still, you think about a historical topic. It's something like role playing for me. I'm too. So it's better than reading a book, because reading a book is just a passive thing. I'm reading the opinion of the author. In a game, I can try out different strategies, and of course, the huge board also helps me to visualize things. I think for me, this is a natural thing that comes together. But of course, thinking that war games will increase your understanding of history, this is also very, very dangerous, because most wargaming authors, designers are amateurs. And of course, the output, what you're getting out of a wargame, can be only as good as the input. And if you are just reading 3 history books, maybe they are not even state of the art, and then design a game based on your knowledge, then history will be distorted. That's for sure. That's why I'm very careful. Lots of people these days, or at least some people, are saying, well, we need more historical games in classes and this will help students. Yeah, but only the very good war games. And I've played literally at least 1,000 war games, probably a lot more, and I would recommend for classes, no matter how long they are. So, of course, this is another difficult thing, because most war games take so long. But I think for teaching, the teaching value of maybe 20 or 30 is good enough. The rest, yes, as an entertainment thing, fine, but not as a teaching tool. Definitely not.
And so, do you still have a copy of Borodino? And if you do you play it?
No. Yes, I have. So first answer is yes, I still have a copy. I'm not playing it at all. So maybe I should, because it's fast playing, but I have a feeling that I will be very disappointed, because it was a standard SPI early 70s system. The same system was used for all Napoleonic battles, for American Civil War battles, everything's the same. So probably if I now look at it with my knowledge from nowadays, I will be terribly disappointed. So it's better there. I know where it is. I can maybe fondle it, but I don't have any intention to play it again.
So moving on, and you've touched on this a little bit. I want to talk a bit about war games. Firstly, what do war games give you? Because I'm not a war gamer. I've stated this on this show. I mean, I've interviewed Mark Herman, and I told him that I don't really know what I'm talking about with regards to this. But what is it about war games? What do they do for you that other types of games don't?
Yeah, first, as you said, we touched on this a little bit. So it's my interest in history that is that I see in war games. They give me something special, and sometimes, especially in modern history, I have some general knowledge about the topic and I may get more interested in it. Sometimes I have no historical knowledge, so I'm playing a war game and then afterwards I immediately want to buy a book or borrow a book and read more about it. So that's also something that I find very valuable. But most war games, in contrast to Euro-type games, they have a pretty large map board or several map boards. So in most Euro-type games are very strong mechanically. War games are, apart from some modern war games, are not that strong mechanically, but the time-space ratio, how to deploy stuff on the map, what to do at what time, that not most European games cannot give you this. They cannot bring this home. But of course, this also most of the time comes with a large time commitment. If you have 500 gaming pieces or 1,000 or 2,000, of course it takes a lot of time to move these, to do some things that have any meaning. But I like this. Of course, with our schedules nowadays, it's very hard to play these long war games anymore.
And so I want to talk about being a German playing war games. So Germany has it's very reluctant to deal with conflict in this way. Not just the Second World War, in general. I think the echoes of the Second World War are so strong in Germany that the thought of playing war games is distasteful to many Germans. How what was the opinion of people around you when you were playing war games, in the 70s and 80s? Did people think it was strange? Were people offended?
Yeah, well, at that time in the late 70s, early 80s, I basically played with my brother and friends from our neighborhood and from school. And I simply did not mention this. I think, well, I don't know if there was a gaming club in my hometown, probably not. But if there would have been one, I probably wouldn't have mentioned it. So playing war is... or was at that time definitely a thing which you better did not mention. So wargaming was really on the fringe. But nowadays it has changed. I think video gaming was most important for this change, because in video games for a decade and more we have lots of shooters, we have very violent games that handle conflict, and this is now more and more accepted in board gaming as well. Of course, there are people, and I can totally understand, that don't want to play a board war game, or they want to play without any conflict, and this is Ravensburger company philosophy, so they don't have any games that involve any conflict at all. So I can perfectly understand, but I think it has changed recently. And yeah, although I'm not playing any war game, so excuse me. You may know from GMT the Bomber Command game, and I definitely don't want to play this game because it's supposed to be a pretty good simulation, but it's about the bombing war over Germany in World War II, and this is a little bit too close to my heart because I know that most cities in Germany were destroyed by bombing. I do understand the topic, and I'm definitely not blaming the British or the Americans for doing the bombing war, because they thought it will bring an end to the war sooner. So I do understand this, but I still don't want to play the Allied player and use more phosgene or phosphor to get some firebombing in a German city. So this is too close to my heart. But everybody has to draw his own line. Some people don't want to play any conflict games. Some are saying we are playing just games from the ancients with ancient topics. Some are saying we are playing basically everything. I'm playing World War II Eastern Front games, and of course I'm aware what happened at the Eastern Front, directly at the front, and of course behind the Eastern Front. And I still play these games, but so for me, Bomber Command or Bombing Command is the line I don't want to cross, but yeah, everybody has to make his own judgment, I think.
I mean, how do you deal with, as a modern German, playing the role of a Nazi general in a game? How does that sit with you when you're playing? Do you divorce yourself from the actual real context of it?
I think you have to, in a way, otherwise I could not play it. I think it helps that you have some historical knowledge, so that you know, let's say we are playing an Eastern Front war game, you are playing the Red Army, I'm playing the Wehrmacht and the SS with allies, and it helps that you have some historical knowledge, that you know, yes, there are, on each hexagon on the map, there are shootings of civilians, and this is going on. I think it helps this, but in a way, I can still just concentrate on moving the units, on moving the military units. But I also, as I said, I understand if some people cannot cross this line or don't want to do a distinction here between just the military affairs and the non-military affairs. And of course, some modern war games at least try to have some political rules involved. I'm not sure if they make for a better gaming experience, but at least some try.
So I want to move on to your next game, and I would guess that this would be a game that you would advocate having realistic historical value. And this is Empire of the Sun. Why is this one coming with you?
Yeah, well, Empire of the Sun, in my opinion, is one of the best games ever being done. First, it's a card-driven war game by Mark Herman, and the card-driven mechanic may be my maybe in my opinion the best and most valuable gaming mechanic of recent time, of the last 25 years. First, it's a card-driven game, and then what it does the topic is the war in the Pacific from 41 to 45, so the scope is tremendous. So it's a strategic game, but you have the Indian Burmese, so the China-Burma theater, you have parts of China, you have Australia, you have Borneo, you have the Solomon Islands, you have Hawaii, everything, the Philippines, everything is involved. And on top of that, you are not leading the military forces alone, but it integrates in one deck of cards also political effects. So it's really a work of art. That this can work is in my opinion, it's a wonderful. So it's a miracle in my opinion, and it's really also a strong game. It's a good simulation, but also a very strong game.
So what's the difference between a good simulation and a strong game? And are there many games that are great simulations but fail as games?
Yeah, there are lots of great simulations that fail as game because you can't play them anymore, in my opinion. I know some games that have more than 100 pages of rules, and of course nothing is unplayable because some people are playing these games. I've seen World of War being played by groups of people. It has 180 pages of rules, but in my opinion, it's a failure of a game if you cannot, with some effort, really enjoy the game. Some simulations are way too dense. They are not fun to play. They are just mechanical exercises. And of course, the other way around is also true. For example, I love Paths of Glory, another popular card-driven game on the First World War, as a game. It's brilliant as a game. It's tense. Sometimes it's like a chess match with moves, counter moves. So it's brilliant, but it's a very poor simulation. It's not a simulation of World War I. Still, I have the game. I play it from time to time. I like it, but as a simulation, it has no value at all. And this gets me back to some of my earlier comments that the output of such a game can be only as good as the input. So using Paths of Glory as a teaching tool your students will think, this happened because of that in World War I. Now I know. No, you don't know. It's because it works in this game as a game mechanic, but it has almost nothing to do with reality. So yeah, it can work in both ways.
So when you speak to wargamers, they will often mention Mark Herman's name. How important is he to the wargaming hobby?
He's most important. I think he's the best and most innovative and most flexible game designer around. He has, and of course, he has huge knowledge because of his professional background, and he's doing this professionally, I think, since '77. So we are talking for more than 40 years. This is a hell of an experience, and he worked with some of the best companies. He worked for SPI in the 70s, the best company at that time. Then he founded Victory Games with Avalon Hill together. Best people at that time were at Victory Games. And now he's working with GMT and other leaders of the wargaming industry and wargaming hobby. So his influence is very high, and he's of course the inventor of the card-driven mechanic as well. But he knows history, and second, he knows how to find the mechanics for the topic. So that's also very important.
So I want to talk about you becoming a publisher. What led you into the murky world of board game publishing?
Yeah, well, I didn't know what to do. This is what it is. So I was studying in Bochum history and politics and Eastern European history, and really, I'd chosen the topics because I was interested. But yeah, well, then suddenly I noticed, well, you're almost done with studying, but you won't find a job, or not easily. So what to do? And I thought, well, I know a lot about war games, so let's start a war game company. If I now look at it, this was I'm shaking my head. How could you do this? How could you risk your few D-Marks, Deutschmarks, which we had at that time, and risk them? But when you're young, you do stuff, and so I tried it, and it worked. So I formed Moments in History at that time. So because I did war games. And my main market was in the US at that time, but it was surprisingly easy to get into the wargaming publishing part in '93 because distributors in the US, they still ordered pretty large numbers of games. So my first game, which I did, had a print run of 2,000 copies, just English language. And I had pre-orders by fax machine, so no internet in '93. I only had internet in '94 then, of 800. So I was so surprised. Nobody knew me. It's a new company in Germany, totally unknown, and American distributors pre-ordered 800 out of these 2,000. So that was, of course, fantastic. And you are thinking this has to go on and get better and better and better, because I only wanted to do this part-time. At that time, I thought you are finishing your PhD thesis and then run your company and everything will be fine. But of course, as a young person, when you have your first money in your hands, well, the PhD thesis is still not finished. I doubt it will be ever finished. So, yeah.
And so, how was the board game world different as opposed to now? I mean, what was the difference in something like Essen, for instance?
Yeah, Essen was a lot smaller. I'm one of the very few hundreds of people who has attended each and every Essen convention. So I even the first ones, which were just in the Volkshochschule, so in a school building, because I was living in Hattingen and I didn't knew about it, but I heard about it in radio. So they had really short notice in the radio program, and I took the S-Bahn. And went over and I was there. At that time, they had even at Essen 1, they had wooden ships and Iron Man tournaments. So of a naval war game of the 19th century. So of course nowadays it's impossible to think about it. In the 90s, when I started with Moments in History, Essen, of course, was already in the fair halls, where Essen now is, but occupying far less ground, much smaller scale. And wargaming was almost non-existent. So for the first couple of years, I only attended Essen as a visitor. So I'm not sure when I had my first booth at Essen, so probably 97. And that was in the far back with some other weirdos, so role players and wargamers and some other nut people. We were in one dark corner and we were selling 2 games a day, so and drinking 20 beers at the same time, so to keep us occupied. But of course it was not at all professional, but it was fun. It was simply fun.
And so you started off as a wargame publisher, but Spielworxx is very different to that. How did you transition from that to what you're currently doing?
Yeah, well, I sold Moments in History in '99 to a US wargaming publisher, and then I went completely out of gaming at all. So I'm also a football. I was a football player, and I had a football coaching license. And when I was looking at a magazine which I'd subscribed to, a coaching magazine, they were looking for a new guy to come to their staff. So I thought, well, let's simply try this. And they took me and I worked there. So it was a regular office job from 8 to 5. It was good.
Writing for a coaching magazine.
Yes, writing for a coaching magazine and sometimes visiting some clubs or some coaches in Germany and doing stuff for them. That was fun, in my opinion. It was good. But the problem is, at least to me, not a general problem, probably when you have worked from home, when you have your own schedule, this is so much better, or at least different, than having your regular office job. So I had to move by car to that place, and when I was just not done with my article, I had to stop in the afternoon because everybody left the building. So, and you were continuing in the next morning. So a very different routine. And then a friend, a Dutch friend, he phoned me and said, Uli, I want to form a new company. And he's the owner, still a good friend, Michael Bruinsma, a wonderful person. You probably saw him at Essen. So at least you saw his son, Bob, when we were entering the Wednesday night thing. So his father, he was my boss, also a wargamer. It was not a wargaming company he was then supposed to found, but he needed somebody to run the company, and he asked me. So and I said, well, yeah, let's do it. And I did this for a couple of years, and we did Eurotype games. So I was suddenly in the Eurotype field. And then later I worked freelance for several other Eurotype companies. And of course, I knew already the Eurotype business. But Spielworxx was founded because I wanted, in 2010, because I wanted to do my own stuff. I was a little bit tired of just develop games that others handed to me. This is your job. Please do a game that is as good as you think can be done out of it. I wanted to do my own games. But I started Spielworxx very modest. So I did a couple of localizations of GMT wargames. So getting again back to Mark Herman, my first game I did was a German language edition, just 500 copies of Washington's War. So, and Washington's War is a reissue of We the People, the very first card-driven game at all from the 90s. So that was reissued by GMT in 2009, and I did the German edition in 2010. But after a while I noticed if I do more complex Eurotype games, and if I have German and English rules, I can sell more copies, so 1,000 copies, and I can sell them faster than just 500 German copies. So that's why my initial business model changed over time a little bit to the more complex Eurotype games I'm now doing.
And so what makes a Spielworxx game?
Yeah, very difficult to say. Basic rule is Uli has to like it. Uli must love it. So then it's a Spielworxx game. But of course, there are some ingredients which are necessary. I love obscure topics. I love serious games, but it's very difficult for me to get serious games because first, there are so few on the market. And second, of course, if it's a very strong license game, they won't ever come to Spielworxx because they know I'm only doing 1,000 in, at least initially, before I may license them. And I'm also looking for games that are not polished too much. So I don't want a point salads game where you get victory points for each and everything. And I want a game that has a soul, that lives, that breathes. This is most important to me. And to my mind, and I'm really glad that there are so many games around, most games nowadays do not fulfill this criteria. So most games I'm seeing recently are very strong mechanically, are very well developed, but still they hold no interest to me because played, done, yeah, this is great, but shall I play it again? No, it doesn't live. It's not a living creature there. It doesn't have any soul. So, and I'm happy that so many people do these games, so many publishers, because it gives me my niche over there. So where basically nobody else is doing these games.
So your next game is one that a few people have chosen on this, and it seems to be quite popular, and this is Pax Porfiriana. Do you think this is Phil Eklund's best?
In my opinion, it is. Definitely it is. This place may be taken by the second edition of Pax Pamir, which is supposed to come out next year by Cole Worley. So I think the first edition of Pax Pamir by Cole suffered because it was too close to Pax Porfiriana. He used too many of the mechanics because he wanted to have a true PAX game. And I think that PAX Renaissance is not a good game. I'm not an expert, but I've played it half a dozen of times. But I think the history in this game is not too good, and frankly, I cannot stand Phil's historical comments anymore. So you have one page of rules, and half of them are of this page are just historical comments. And I'm a historian. I'm definitely not an expert in early modern history or in Middle Age history, but some of this writing is poor. It's really bad, and this has already, before I've played my first game, it has lessened my enjoyment already there. But Pax Porfiriana, in my opinion, is really a miracle. You have 220 cards, and each one is only there once, so you don't have a deck of 60 cards which are all the same and which you can balance way easier. And on top of that, you're not playing with these 220 cards. You are playing with 50 or 60 plus 10 cards per player. So half of the cards, or more than half of the cards, you're not playing with, but still it works, and it works perfectly fine. Again, rules presentation is very bad. It's a smallish box, so yeah, it could have been presented in a much better way, but the actual play value is outstanding. And of course, a topic, where can you have a card that is an anarcho-syndicalist, or there is the whole Mexican Navy, which is one gunboat with one Krupp gun on top of it, and you have it on the flavor text, and I love it. I just love to look at the card and play it. And again, this is also my play style. We immediately, you place a card on the table, read out loud the flavor text, and we immediately have a story. So of course, the playtime will be very long, but we will have so much fun. It's really a wonderful experience if you are in this style of gaming. But it works very well as a game. It's not that you just have card text which are fun to read. It's a great game in my opinion.
And so what niche do you think Phil Eklund fills in the board gaming world?
Yeah, he's definitely not afraid to tackle subjects that nobody else would do. So Pax Porfiriana is not his first game on the Mexican Revolution, or at least about the Mexican history at the turn to the 20th century. He did lots of the Sierra Madre twice before, which was a card game and a board game later, and now it's again with Pax Porfiriana a card game, but he has also games about other very interesting topics. And Phil, no matter what I told you before about the notes in Pax Renaissance, is a very bright person. He's a rocket scientist. His mind, in my opinion, sometimes is too fast what he wants to do in the gaming rules. So that's why half of the rules are in the glossary. Some are not there at all. So that's his problem, in my opinion. But still a wonderful designer there. And nobody else would have done such a game. And of course, I'm interested in esoteric topics, but I have no capabilities to design such a game myself. I don't have enough knowledge, and on top of that, I'm not a designer. I don't have the skills to bring such a game together. I can't do this.
So I want to grill you for the benefit of people who are listening who are maybe trying to get into publishing, because you've been in the game now for a long time and you're successful at it. So what are the dangers of publishing board games in the current market?
Yeah, at first it seems, especially if you are visiting Essen, it seems to be pretty easy. Lots of people, there must be lots of buyers, so you can make a fortune, probably, some people are thinking. And of course, nowadays it's way easier to do a game than 20 years ago, because you can send print-ready PDFs to the printer, and he can print from there. So it's easy in a way, but of course, the game has to be fully professional nowadays. Only if you are a very special publisher who says right from the start, I'm doing this print on demand, you can get away with amateur quality. Nowadays, you have, even if you're just doing a print run of a 1000 like I'm doing, you need to have top quality, and this costs real money. But everything costs quite a bit of money. You want to have a good artist. But a good artist, he wants to be paid. Nobody wants, and of course this is absolutely correct, because artists are not making enough money, designers are not making enough money, but they want to get paid. And people don't realize how difficult or how hard it can be to find your spot in the market, because it's oversaturated. Nobody is waiting for you. There are so many games released a year. Why should they buy the new game from a new kid on the block? And yes, there is Gloomhaven. There are other games which sold outstandingly well, but for each Gloomhaven, probably there are 100 failures, and companies come and go very, very quickly. So yeah, if you have a large fortune, of course, in gaming you can make a small fortune. That's not a problem at all. But the other way around is difficult. But I'm not saying don't try it. Yes, people should try it if they are determined. Maybe it's just because it's a hobby for them. They have that amount of money, they want to do the game, and if they lose all of this money, no problem. Yes, do it. But for a business career, it can be difficult. You have to have a long breath, and you better know the market. And nowadays, it's not as easy as when I started in the 90s, because there are so many more companies and games around.
So what would be 3 mistakes that you would tell people to avoid when they started a publishing company?
First, a lot of the persons I talked to in the last couple of years who approached me how to start, they were over optimistic. You have to count with the worst case, not with the best case. I'm always giving the advice, you need all the money that you invest, better think that it's completely gone. Can you still live without a problem? Will you have any problem when this is gone? If they are saying, yes, I need some money out of this earlier, then better not start it. So definitely lots of people are over optimistic. And second is, they want to print too many. And of course, the printing companies are telling them, yeah, if you're doing 3,000 copies, look at the prices compared to the per unit costs compared to 1,000. Oh, this is so much better. And of course, you have seen Essen. You know how many games are being sold in Germany, in Europe. You will make it without any problem. You can sell 10,000, so better do 3,000, you'll be safe. No. Don't do this, because the distribution system is broken. The distribution, nobody is waiting for you. Where are you selling your game? Direct, via Kickstarter? Or do you think you can sell it via stores? And then suddenly the 3,000 units will be a huge problem, or maybe a huge problem, because of course in distribution you are getting back 40 to 50% of the retail price, and suddenly and sometimes maybe only you're getting back some part of the money after 2 years. You get a mail from your distributor, I sold another 4 of your games in the last half years. Here's your check about €7. So good luck. And so people are too optimistic and they want to do too much at the same time. But this may be also a personality thing by me, because I always want to have things safe. So I'm very sure if for some Spielworxx games I would have immediately printed 5,000 or maybe even 10,000. Some titles are that strong and they have sold over the years many more than 10,000 copies, then I would have made more money. But I have to sleep well. And this is for me is most important. I have to sleep well, and before Essen I'm always sleeping not well, but on the rest of the days I'm sleeping well, and this is more important to me. But again, we are getting back to this command. If somebody has this money, and it's not a problem if he loses all of this, yes, then be bold, do this. If you have a clear vision, yes, try it, and maybe you are that successful. Just keep in mind, for every success story we have 10 failure stories, but they are not in the press. Nobody talks about them. Nobody sees these people in the industry anyway. But of course we see Isaac, Gloomhaven, for years and years, because he is the one who is in the in light, because he is successful, and of course he did a great job. But others, probably 9 others, did the same great job, but they did not make it, because you need also a lot of luck. And if you're unlucky, then what? Money is lost.
So your next game is Here I Stand. And this is a game set in the Reformation era with Martin Luther and things like this. And you published Sola Fide, which is a much smaller game to that, but dealing with the same period of history. Are you interested about the Reformation times? And is this why this game is here?
Yeah, first, yes, I'm interested in this time a lot. I think it's the most important period in European history. A lot happened at that time, a lot changed, and a lot of these changes are very important for modern times. But this is just a part of the reason. I think Here I Stand is one of the best multiplayer games around. It can be played from 2 to 6, but in my opinion, it should be played with just 6 persons and not any less number. But then the victory conditions are different for each power. So the Ottoman Empire is, of course, completely different victory conditions than, for example, Habsburg or the Papal States. The Ottoman Empire, he couldn't care less if Europe is Reformist, so Protestant, or Catholic. Doesn't matter at all. But then it's a card-driven game too, which appeals a lot, of course, to me. And you have events that are so colorful in the game. Everything is possible. So the gaming experience is brilliant, and you get really into the mindset of the powers. And this is also in my opinion, a sign of a good game, that you are thinking in terms of the Habsburgs. Of course, as a Habsburg player, everybody is attacking you. You have enemies all around. And if there's also a short bit of diplomacy, so you're talking at the start of each turn to the other players, and you're getting paranoid because you think everybody really wants to destroy you. So it's a very, very strong game. On the bad thing is that it probably takes 6 to 8 hours to complete. But you can play it by vessel, so electronically as well. So you can leave it set up, and it's, in my opinion, everybody should at least, who is a gamer, should try Here I Stand. Yes, there will be quite a few people who say after one turn, this is not the game for me, but at least give it a try. And don't give it a try with just 2 or 3 players, because then you are playing more nations or more powers at the same time. So you can't be in this mindset. And of course, you're thinking in too many different ways. And this, in my opinion, is not good for the gaming experience.
So what's in the future for you and Spielworxx? And how does your new position with Compass Games fit into that?
Yeah, let's start with Spielworxx. So in 2019, I'm doing 4 games. So I'm starting with Yinzi, which is a game by 2 Portuguese authors. And this is about the late Ming Dynasty, which is a typical heavy Euro type game. But it's on the last 200 miles of the Yangtze River in China. And it's an interesting time because Europeans are appearing, and Yinzi is silver, means silver. At that time, silver was more valuable than gold because the Europeans, via the Americas, brought in silver, and the Chinese did not have any silver. And this is the most valuable thing over there. But it's a really strong game with a good theme. After that, I'm having Die Macher, which of course is a new edition by Kalle Schmiel. I'm very much looking forward to that edition. We changed a little bit. It's also now a smaller game, so you have still the full 7 elections if you want to play this, or you can have a shorter game with just 4 elections. And then in July I will have a special project, which is a little bit different from my other Spielworxx releases, although I'm not 100% sure how much different it will be. The title is Auf der Walz. So these are craftsmen who have to travel through Germany or the neighboring parts of Europe for 3 years plus 1 day, and they cannot go back within 50 kilometers of their home place. And when they return, when they really make it, a lot do not make it because of course it's hard, and they work for just food or sometimes just to sleep there. After a week they move on, or after a day they move on. But if they make it back, they can do whatever they want because they have learned everything. So they needed to do everything. And the author is such a person who was Auf der Walz, the most interesting character. He's also running now his own business, but he's a very good musician, and he's interested in literature. So a very interesting character, good guy. And then in October, I'm having, by Robin Lees and Steve McKenzie, The Throne of Allegoria, which is a game that uses a lot of mechanics from Euro-type games, which you have seen several times, but not how they have modeled it all together now. And it's in a fantasy kingdom, middle age fantasy kingdom, and the king is dying, you know this, but you want to be his successor, or you want to start the republic. And this is, in my opinion, a great game, and it's a pleasure to work with Robin and Steve. I met them in August in Hamburg. So because, as you know, they are living in Denmark, and they came south from Denmark to Hamburg, and I was traveling north to Hamburg, and it was a fantastic day last week, and I tried the new version, and it works well, but we still have to work on this one. But I'm 100% sure this will be a great Essen release for next year. Yeah, and Compass Games, I'm doing, they started a Eurotype division, so I want to help them. And we will have several releases in 2019 as well. So we will have a game by Michael Schacht, who did Soloretto, is Game of the Year winner. We will have a game by Matthias Kramer, who is Dutch Game of the Year winner, who was nominated for Game of the Year, who is Deutsche Spielepreis nominee and
won the Spiel des Jahres.
He won Spiel des Jahres? Matthias Kramer? Oh, he did?
I think so. I think Azul won.
Yeah, well, I'm not that sure, but I'm not having the gamer all the games around. So but he's a great designer and a good friend of mine. And also a wargamer, so that always helps. He's also doing a great game on the Weimar politics, which I hope to publish whenever it is ready. But this is in the future. And we will have a game by Aaron Haag, who did some games for Argentum and for other companies. So these games are fixed for next year. So yeah, keeps me busy, keeps me occupied.
So your final game is a classic, a huge classic, and a classic that has a terrible reputation for ruining friendships. And this is Diplomacy. Firstly, do you think that reputation's deserved?
Yeah, I've heard, of course, also all these stories. Friendships ended, people are not talking to each other, and I've heard it from several different people. So probably it's true. I can't imagine this. I can't really imagine this because to me it's a game. Yeah, of course, if somebody lies to you, even in a gaming environment, I think some people cannot really cope with this. For some people, this is very difficult, and they lie into your face. It's not from via an email or something, and they lie to you several times within 2 hours or 3 hours. So this can be problematic, but I've never experienced this. With my friends, we are still laughing about this. So sometimes, of course, when we played, we were surprised because I genuinely believed somebody, he's doing this, and then we were somebody read the notes, read the moves, and and I had said, well, you're not moving into the Black Sea, and he said, yes, of course I'm not. We have a standoff, and then he moved into the Black Sea, and I said, well, how did you do this? But of course, for me, it's cursing and swearing and all this. It's part of the fun, in my opinion. So yeah.
And so, would you term Diplomacy a war game? Because one thing Diplomacy is very simple, and war games have this reputation for being super complex.
Yeah, well, but a good war game doesn't have to be complex. Washington's War or We the People is very simple for a war game. Still, I would not term it as a war game because it's turn of the century, World War I era game, and of course, for that to be a real game about the conflict, probably the mechanics are a little bit too simple, but the game shines because everything is in your head. So maybe this is even better than a war game which has 40 pages of rules, where you have rules for artillery and you are saying, well, my German whatever caliber artillery is better than yours, and my captain of my battleship, I look it up on my table, he has had excellent breakfast, so this is a +1 modifier for the next fight. So but everything is in your head and you're getting paranoid, and this paranoia that he will attack me, can I believe him? This is, I would not term it as a wargaming-ish thing. I would say it's brilliant for a game because mechanics are so simple that you can concentrate on the meta game or on the other level of the game. And this is intense without being complex in rules or in mechanics. The rules are very, very simple, as you know, but everything is there. And again, it's not a game for everybody, and it's also not a modern game because it's player elimination, and you can be out in a 7-player game after, if you're unlucky, after 45 minutes, or if you played badly, and that means if you don't have access to a new game, you can go home or read a book, and the other players are playing for another 5 hours. So, but I did not play the game for almost 30 years, and I restarted it last year, and we were at a meetup with some other gamers, and there it wasn't any problem. If you dropped out, you could play something else with somebody else. So I think, again, this is a brilliant game. I just would wish it's not player elimination, single player elimination, and that it would take a little bit less time to finish. But a modern diplomacy, in my opinion, would be the holy grail. It would mean very simple rules, everything is in your mind and playable in a short period of time. But yeah, well, I talked to a lot of authors, designers about this, and some said, well, I'm thinking about this, but it's probably not achievable easily.
So one last question. So you're heading out of the city. The car is herring down the road. You go around a corner. The back door flies open. 4 of the games fly out. They go down a ravine, swept away to posterity. And 1 game is left on the back seat of the car. Which one do you hope it is?
Yeah, well, at first, I wouldn't care too much about this, but if I'm seeing Empire of the Sun being still there, I would be probably most happy. So, first, this is a good 2-player game. So, Diplomacy, of course, is not a good 2-player game. Here I Stand is not a good 2-player game. And Empire of the Sun, I can even play solitaire. So, and it has so much depth and so many different strategies. So I'm occupied probably for a long time, or at least till I'm starving. Because going back to the start of our conversation, I'm not very practical. So if I'm alone in this world, I'm dead very soon, unless I find some cache of food or beer or whatever, or whiskey. So that would help me for another day probably. So it would be Empire of the Sun.
So if people want to get hold of you, how would they do that?
They can reach me via my website, so via my email address. So that's uli@spielworxx.de, or via Twitter. So I have a Twitter handle. You can reach me at Uli Ble, so ULIBLE, or Spielworxx. You can look me up. I'm not active on any other kind of social media. I'm not in any forums. I'm checking BGG, Board Game Geek, from time to time. If you send me a message, I will answer it, but don't expect it will be on the same day. But I need to work on other things. But yeah, I'm good answering my mails. So that's at least I can say.
Well, Uli Blenemann, thank you very much.
I thank you, Ben. It was a pleasure, really a pleasure.
And if you want to suggest a guest, or if you want to say something nice about the show, or if you want to say something horrible about the show, you can contact me on @5gamesfordoomsday on Twitter, or you can send me an email at 5gamesfordoomsday@gmail.com. You can give a rolling donation to help support the show at patreon.com/5G4D, or a one-time PayPal donation at the bottom of the website 5gamesfordoomsday.com. And if I haven't had to escape the Blood Bowls and all of that shit over there, I'll see you in 2 weeks for another 5 Games for Doomsday.